My hands stopped moving on the keyboard when I heard my father's voice through the kitchen wall. "The paperwork's ready. Once we file, Marcus will have 30 days to vacate." The blueprint I'd been working on, my kitchen renovation plans, suddenly felt meaningless as ice spread through my chest. I pressed my ear against the wall, my coffee growing cold beside sketches of the home I'd spent 3 years rebuilding. "Are you sure this will work?" My mother's voice, usually warm, sounded calculating. "The trust fund documentation is solid. My lawyer says since the down payment technically came from family money, we have grounds to reclaim it for Lily's wedding gift." My sister's laugh cut through the drywall like a blade. "Good. I want Marcus out before Ryan and I get engaged. This house will photograph beautifully for our announcement." The kitchen walls I'd refinished myself seemed to pulse as my vision narrowed. The trust fund they were discussing, the one that supposedly funded my down payment, had never existed when I bought this house. I'd used my divorce settlement, every penny I'd saved from 15 years of marriage. "My name is Marcus. I'm 34 and a contractor. This is the story of how I built something they couldn't tear down." 3 years earlier, after my divorce from Sarah, I'd bought this run-down craftsman house 6 blocks from where I grew up. The foundation was cracked, the kitchen hadn't been updated since 1987, and the hardwood floors were warped beyond recognition. But it was mine. For the first time since the divorce papers were signed, I owned something that couldn't be taken away in a settlement. My parents had been supportive, even excited. Dad helped me negotiate with contractors when I couldn't do the work myself. Mom brought casseroles during the worst renovation months when I was living on takeout and determination. Lily visited regularly, cooing over paint samples and fixture choices, calling it the perfect starter home. I should have noticed when their visits became more purposeful. Dad started asking detailed questions about my mortgage terms. Mom would linger by my desk, glancing at financial documents. Lily began making comments about how convenient it would be if she lived nearby once she and Ryan got serious. The shift happened gradually. Dad mentioned a family trust I'd never heard of. Mom suggested I should document my improvements for insurance purposes. Lily started referring to the house as temporarily mine in conversations with friends. When I asked direct questions, they deflected with smiles and subject changes. But standing in my kitchen that morning, listening to them plot my eviction, the pattern crystallized. They hadn't been supporting my fresh start. They'd been planning its end. That night, I called my daughter Emma for our regular Wednesday video chat. At 7 years old, she possessed the kind of observational skills adults had forgotten, noticing things that seemed insignificant until they weren't. "Daddy, why does Grandma say you might move again?" she asked, adjusting her tablet so I could see her coloring. I kept my voice steady. "What did Grandma say exactly?" Emma's crayon paused. "She told Grandpa that you'll probably want to move somewhere smaller soon. She said big houses are too much work for people like you." People like me. Divorced. Alone. Disposable. Did she say anything else? "She said Aunt Lily needs a grown-up house now, and yours would be perfect for her and Uncle Ryan." Emma resumed coloring, unaware she'd just handed me the first piece of evidence. Over the following weeks, I started documenting everything. As a contractor, I was familiar with recording calls for work disputes and had the legal recording equipment already set up for my business line. I installed security cameras that captured audio, positioning them as general home security. Most importantly, I started listening to my family with different ears. The truth emerged in fragments. My parents had convinced themselves that their emotional support during my divorce entitled them to a return on investment. Dad's accounting background had helped him craft legal documents suggesting a family trust had funded my down payment, though I later learned he'd been working on these fabricated documents for months with a questionable lawyer willing to file dubious claims. Mom had been building a narrative that I was struggling financially, that the house was too much for me to handle alone. Lily had been the most direct in private conversations, calling the house my future wedding venue to friends and discussing renovation plans for after I moved somewhere more appropriate. They'd constructed an entire mythology around their generosity and my inadequacy. In their version, I was the temporary caretaker of what rightfully belonged to the family's next generation. The real breakthrough came during Emma's spring break visit. She was playing in the living room while my parents visited. tablet propped against the couch cushions as she watched videos with headphones. They assumed she wasn't listening, the way adults always underestimate children's awareness. "The filing date is set for next month," Dad told Mom in what he thought was a private moment. "Marcus won't fight it. He never fights for anything." "Good," Mom replied. "Lily's already picked out new paint colors. She wants to start fresh." Lily, who had arrived for Sunday dinner, joined their conversation seamlessly. "I can't wait to gut that kitchen. Marcus has no sense of design." "Once he's gone, you can make it your own," Mom assured her. "He'll understand it's for family." Emma kept coloring, but I noticed her tablet wasn't playing videos anymore. The screen showed her voice recorder app, the same one she used for school projects. She'd been learning about journalism at school and had gotten into the habit of recording interesting conversations for her news reports to share with her teacher. That evening, after my parents left, Emma approached me with careful steps. "Daddy, I accidentally recorded something. Want to hear?" The audio was crystal clear. My family in my living room discussing my eviction like a business transaction. Their voices carried no guilt, no hesitation, only the certainty that I would accept their decision because I always had. Emma looked worried. "Are you mad at me for recording?" I knelt to her eye level. "No, sweetheart, you may have just saved my home." The lawsuit papers arrived 2 weeks later. Anderson versus Anderson, just as Dad had planned. The complaint claimed I had used family trust funds for my down payment and that the property should be transferred to its intended beneficiary, my sister. I didn't confront them. I didn't argue or plead. I simply called my lawyer and began preparing for court. My parents continued their Sunday visits as if nothing had changed. They brought food, offered home repair advice, and asked about my legal representation with concerned faces. Dad even suggested I shouldn't waste money on expensive lawyers for something that could be worked out as a family. I played along, answering their questions, accepting their help, all while building my defense around the evidence they'd unknowingly provided. The morning of the hearing, I watched my parents dress with unusual care. Dad wore his best suit, the one he saved for important business meetings. Mom had chosen her most conservative dress, the kind that suggested respectability and maternal wisdom. Lily arrived looking appropriately distressed, tissues ready, her story rehearsed. They truly believed their performance would carry the day. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, wood-paneled and formal. Judge Patricia Williams, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an impatient manner, reviewed the case summary with visible skepticism. My parents' lawyer presented their case first. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's son used family trust funds to purchase this property with the understanding it would be transferred to his sister upon her engagement. The defendant has exceeded the terms of this informal arrangement." Judge Williams looked up from her notes. "I see references to a family trust in your filing. Please provide the trust documentation." Dad's lawyer shuffled through his papers, producing a folder. "The trust was managed informally, Your Honor. These documents reflect the family's intentions." The judge examined the papers for several minutes. "These appear to be drafts, unsigned and unnotarized. Do you have executed trust documents?" "The arrangements were based on verbal agreements and family understanding," the lawyer replied, his confidence wavering. "Verbal agreements," Judge Williams repeated, her tone flat, "regarding a property purchase requiring extensive documentation and legal procedures." My turn came after an uncomfortable pause. I stood, adjusted my tie, and addressed the court. "Your Honor, my 7-year-old daughter has something she'd like to share with the court. She recorded something she felt was important." Judge Williams raised an eyebrow. "This is highly irregular, but I'll allow it. Please proceed." Emma walked forward, tablet clutched in her small hands. She looked nervous but determined, the way children do when they know something is important, but don't fully understand why. "I was coloring and accidentally recorded Grandma and Grandpa talking," she said softly. "They said things about Daddy that didn't sound true." She pressed play, and the courtroom filled with my family's voices. Dad said, "The filing date is set for next month. Marcus won't fight it. He never fights for anything." Mom replied, "Good. Lily's already picked out new paint colors. She wants to start fresh." Lily added, "I can't wait to gut that kitchen. Marcus has no sense of design." Mom assured her. Once he's gone, you can make it your own. He'll understand it's for family. The silence that followed was profound. Judge Williams leaned forward, her expression transformed from skepticism to something approaching disgust. This recording was made in your home, Mr. Anderson? Yes, Your Honor. My daughter was playing in the living room during a family visit. I've submitted the complete unedited file with metadata and timestamp verification to the court. She nodded slowly, then turned to my parents. So you filed this lawsuit knowing you had no legitimate legal claim, counting on the defendant's unwillingness to fight you in court? My father's face had gone pale. Mom stared at her hands. Lily's rehearsed tears had dried up, replaced by something closer to panic. Your Honor, their lawyer began, family dynamics can be complicated. Judge Williams cut him off with a raised hand. I've heard enough. The gavel came down with finality. Case dismissed. The property remains with the defendant. Furthermore, I'm forwarding this matter to the appropriate authorities for potential fraud investigation. My parents sat frozen in their chairs. Lily started to speak, then stopped, apparently realizing anything she said would only make things worse. I turned to Emma and whispered, You did perfectly, sweetheart. Thank you for helping Daddy. When I stood to leave, my father finally found his voice. You think this is over? I looked at him directly for the first time that day. No, Dad, I think it's just beginning. They left without another word. I didn't follow them to the parking lot. I didn't call to explain or apologize. For once in my relationship with my family, I had nothing to say. That evening, Emma and I ordered pizza and ate it in the living room they'd planned to redecorate. She curled up next to me on the couch I'd bought myself, in the house I'd rebuilt with my own hands. Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us? She asked. I considered lying, protecting her from the weight of adult disappointments. Instead, I chose honesty. They're mad because they tried to take something that wasn't theirs, and it didn't work. That's not your fault or my fault. That's their choice. She nodded solemnly, the way children do when they understand more than adults expect them to. The house was quiet that night, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not the silence of someone waiting for the other shoe to drop, but the peace of someone who had finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. I walked through rooms I'd painted, over floors I'd refinished, past windows I'd replaced, and realized something important. They'd wanted a house, but I'd built a home. They'd seen an asset to redistribute, but I'd created a place where my daughter felt safe enough to speak truth to power. My parents had counted on my compliance, my lifetime pattern of avoiding conflict and accepting their decisions. They'd forgotten that people who rebuild houses from the foundation up have learned something about what's worth fighting for. Justice doesn't always announce itself with dramatic revelations or courtroom theatrics. Sometimes it sounds like a 7-year-old girl asking if she can show you something important. Sometimes it looks like choosing to document rather than deny, to prepare rather than hope, to stand firm rather than bend. 6 months later, I received word that the fraud investigation had resulted in a formal censure for my father and financial penalties for filing false documents. Dad's threat of, "This isn't over," never materialized. His lawyer had advised him that any further legal action would only strengthen the fraud charges against him. As for our family relationships, they ended that day in the courthouse. My parents made no attempt to apologize or reconcile, and I made the decision to protect Emma from their manipulation by ending all contact. She asks about her grandparents sometimes, but I've explained that some people make choices that change relationships forever, and this was one of those times. That night, I started sketching new renovation plans, not because the house needed changing, but because I finally understood it was truly mine to change. Every wall, every room, every corner now stood as proof of something they couldn't take away. The difference between being given something and earning it yourself. If you're dealing with family members who mistake your kindness for weakness, who mistake your history of compromise for permanent submission, remember this. The people who truly love you don't plot your displacement during Sunday dinner. They don't count on your refusal to fight back as part of their strategy. And sometimes, the voice that saves you isn't your own. It's the small, honest voice of someone who loves you enough to accidentally record the truth. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.